Golden Spiral Media presents The Blacklist Exposed.
Who is Sebastian Royce? Well, he's a blacklister you may not have heard of, so hang on to your fedora as we'll soon find out. Welcome to The Blacklist Exposed. I am Agent Troy Heinrichs.
And I'm Agent Aaron Peterson. Thank you for joining us this week as we dig a little deeper into the expanded universe of Mr. Red Reddington and Friends. Many of you Blacklist faithful have already read the recent Blacklist comic book series, but many of you may not even know it exists. So this week, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into this expanded mythology and talk with the writer of the Blacklist comic series herself, as well as the writer of the show, of the Blacklist, Nicole Phillips. Show notes and other intel for this episode of The Blacklist Exposed can be found at theblacklistexposed.com. Troy, this interview, we've already done it, obviously. What did you think?
I thought it was great. One thing that's really fun about comics, fan fiction, expanded universe, it literally gives us an informational portal into things that may or may not ever be part of the television show. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoy the fact that a lot of places are starting to see this concept of either fan fiction coming into play, or in this case, a show-sponsored piece of work that actually becomes canon, because it really gives us the ability to go deeper into characters that we really have grown to love, especially when we're in the midst of a third season of a TV show that's been successful.
Yeah, and the thing I like most about it is that, you know, we get a different angle. I'm a big fan of, and I've said this before in the podcast, I love behind the scenes. I love the production element. You know, I'm a big movie and television fan. I like the nuts and bolts. I like to see how it's all done. So to hear somebody talk about not just the comic, but also, you know, how she began as a writing assistant and worked her way up to script supervisor or script coordinator, and continued that. And now she's a staff writer on the Blacklist. And her first episode's coming out, episode 13 of this season. So she's got, I mean, how that has transpired, and that there's so many moving parts to the show. And now you've got this expanded universe. It's just really, really interesting to a fan, and especially someone like myself who just loves that behind-the-scenes stuff. There's a lot of really cool stuff that we talk about in this interview.
Yeah, especially like where her origins came from and how that kind of influenced how she approached the Blacklist comic, how she even got it pitched in the first place. I think you're going to see some really great stories coming from Nicole, and maybe even get a little bit more insight into the writer's room itself.
That's right. Well, without further ado, it's an exciting interview. It's a very interesting interview. I hope you enjoy it. It's time to listen to our interview with Blacklist comic book writer Nicole Phillips.
Well, guys, we have a special treat for you here this evening. Nicole Phillips is here, and she is the mastermind behind the Blacklist comic book that came out during Comic-Con of 2015, and it's been pretty exciting actually reading it. We just finished up Series 1. They had 5 issues total, and Series 2 is right around the corner, Nicole, so we're glad you're here. Thanks for coming on.
Can you just follow me around and just say that when I go into like random doors and rooms? Because that was wonderful.
That was we can absolutely do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored that you guys are interested in talking about the comic and having me on the show. I think it's great, this podcast that you're doing for fans, and I'm thrilled to be here.
I got to tell you, I went to, before we really get into talking about your work on the show and the comic book, I was at Comic-Con covering it, and I had to get that comic, that limited edition comic, because Troy had to have the limited edition. He couldn't just buy a regular old one.
Yeah, no, I feel that.
had to have the special cover.
There was actually quite a line. I mean, it was quite a, I don't want to say hassle, because everything at Comic-Con is kind of a hassle, but it was a lot more hectic than I envisioned. So have you gotten a good response, I would assume?
Comic-Con especially was wonderful, and I was surprised and delighted with how many people came, you know, to get signatures and to hear us speak, because we had a little panel that Titan put on about the comic. But no, we had a lot of fans come through the line. The best was when we had families come through, because I had several people where it was like the mom, the dad, the kids, and they were all like, Blacklist is one of those shows that we all watch together as a family, and it's something that we can talk about. And now we're interested, you know, in getting these comics, and people were just so happy. So it was a really nice experience.
I mean, clearly those families were like 3-year-olds and younger, right? They were watching the Blacklist.
Yeah. No, it's we tried to design the show for the preschool set, and I think that comes across.
It's so good.
That's a sad preschooler right there. He has a dark mind if he's reading the Blacklist. Well, before we get into the details, the comic, the show, everything else, what got you into writing? We kind of want to talk about you and what got you to where you are at this point.
Oh my goodness, I have the most boring origin story.
Jazz
ever.
it up. You got on a bus, you ended up in a crack house. Do whatever you got to do.
No. I mean, I was one of those kids where it was just what I always wanted to do. And so, I mean, I was, in elementary school, whenever you had to make presentations and things in front of the class, I was the kid who was like, oh, well, let's write a little skit and let's film it and, put it out in front of people. And I noticed those always got the better responses as opposed to people standing up there reading a sheet or just writing something for the teacher. So there was a part of me that always wanted to tell stories and entertain in that way. And then after a while, I was like, well, I can make videos, but that takes other people and it takes money, to have the cameras, or I can just sit and, write something for people instead and let that story take place in their minds. So I ended up writing a lot of stories in high school. And then I came out to USC to major in film production, and that's what got me out to California. Mm-hmm. And I kept writing, I kept making stuff, and then my very last year of USC, I read in Variety, which is the industry newspaper out here that I'm sure you guys are familiar with, mm-hmm. that this company called Bad Robot had licensed the Dark Tower series, and at the time I didn't know anything about them. I wasn't quite sure, what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to write stuff, but I didn't know, whether it was film or TV or if I was just going to go and write novels by myself in a cabin. But I knew that I loved this Dark Tower series because I was a huge Stephen King fan. And I'm like, man, I got to find a way to get in with this company. So I asked a couple people at USC who I went to school with, and eventually I ended up getting an internship at Bad Robot, the company, and I worked there as an assistant for about 3 years.
What does that entail, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, sure. When I was there, I was J.J. Abrams' assistant.
Mr. Abrams, so you're technically associated Star Wars now. You know that, right?
Oh, my goodness.
6 degrees of separation. You're part of Star Wars. Congratulations.
Oh, my goodness. No, so it was, a lot of assistant duties in terms of, scheduling, being the body person on set and things like that. But it was also my very first industry job. So I got incredibly spoiled, to be around that sort of environment, people making those, the sorts of stuff that I always wanted to make. And suddenly I was around incredibly passionate people working 20-hour days to really make these amazing things happen. So then I was there for about 3 years. I kept writing the whole time. Eventually I was like, well, I think we are in a golden age of television right now. Like I started just watching more TV than film. I would go to a 2-hour movie and I'd be like, okay, this is a great setup for a story. And then the movie would be over. And then meanwhile, I would go home and, binge watch a whole series or, seasons of stuff. And I was just really liking what was on television more than films. So then at the time, 3 years into my job there, JJ had a show called Fringe that was on that you guys may also be familiar with.
It's one of Troy's favorite shows. It's stupid how much he obsesses over that
My
show.
wife is actually rewatching it for the first time, and we just finished Brown Betty this evening.
Oh, I love that one.
It's so good.
Oh, man. So I went over there. I ended up going to Fringe as a writer's assistant for 2 years, and I was there the 3rd season and the 4th season. Then I left Fringe and made a couple of wonderful friends there, some of whom have now come over to Blacklist. Mm-hmm. And so then when Blacklist was starting up, I sort of transitioned from a writer's assistant job on on Fringe, to a script coordinator job on Blacklist.
Now, what is a script coordinator? Because a lot of people aren't familiar with Hollywood terms. So Tell them what a script coordinator does.
Yeah, well, there are a couple, when you're trying to become a writer in the industry, there are a couple of ways to do it that are all difficult. But I mean, one is what they sort of teach you at the film schools, which is to just write as much as you can, hone your craft, which you should be doing anyway, but write as much as you can and make that perfect material, make the one thing, make your opus, and then that's going to get you noticed. And obviously that works for a couple people, but for a lot of people, the other route that you can go is to, also be writing on nights and weekends, but then just go ahead and get a job in the industry. Go and get an assistant job, be around people who you can then, talk to, make friends with, learn from, and then you'll have somebody to show your stuff to eventually, as opposed to just, being by yourself, working. And so if you're looking to get into television, for example, there are a couple of different assistant jobs available on shows. Starting from the very bottom, there is the writer's PA. And the writer's PA is available to anyone on staff to sort of do anything that may be necessary. It's a little bit of the grunt work. It's the starting place for a lot of people. They're the ones who get lunch. They sometimes take notes. They run errands. They're in their car a lot. They get a lot of mileage.
Well, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, you have to. And everyone knows that too. And that's the good thing. If you're on a show where people have sort of moved up from the bottom, they know that, and you can tell a lot about people by how they treat people they can't get anything from, So if you're on a good show, then you'll be respected the whole way. So writer's PA is on the bottom. A step up from that is the writer's assistant, which is the job that I had on Fringe. And here on Blacklist, we have a wonderful writer's assistant named Dave Metzger, who is fantastic. But that job differs from writer's PA, and then that person is the person that is in the room with the writers every single day, writes everything that happens in the room. I mean, sometimes word for word, so that people don't forget anything. And then at the end of the day, compiles all of those notes to a list of bullet points. Like, oh, we talked about something at 9 a.m., but then by the time it got to 4 or 5, we landed on something completely different. Here's that bullet point of what we landed on, so that when the writers then read it at the end of the day, they don't have to replay the day in their heads, and they can get a little bit of sleep as much as they can.
That's really interesting. I think it's great for people that are familiar with the show, but they're used to, they know the people on the show, the actors, and they might know the showrunners like John and some others. But it's good for people to realize how many factors go into actually making every episode. So that's really interesting to me.
Oh, great! Yeah, we have a ton of people. I mean, here in Los Angeles, in the writer's office, there are, I'd say about 20, and then there's our obviously our huge production staff in New York. So by the time something gets to screen, it's had, hundreds of fingerprints on it to make it the best that it can be.
That's impressive. Okay, continue. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to say that.
Oh, so then the third, actually there's two more. Then usually the showrunners or the executive producers also have assistant jobs. And these are great jobs to get if you're looking to, start out in the industry. They tend to, as opposed to being in the writer's room, they're in offices by the showrunners, by the executive producers, and they take calls from the studio and the network. They work with whoever the showrunner or executive producer needs to work with. They set meetings. They're in charge of organizing their day-to-day, organizing their lives. And those are wonderful jobs because you get to know the people that are right at, the very top of the show who are making the decisions, and you get to hear those calls that not many people get to hear. Like if the network or the studio has a certain note that, for example, maybe the showrunner agrees with, maybe they don't agree with, they have these calls where they discuss possible fixes and possible ways that things can go. And you get to hear that. So you get to hear, how compromises are made, how, one person has an idea, another person adds to that. And sometimes, when one person wants it to be a particular way, you get to see these skilled ways in which the other party sometimes turns them around. So, that's incredibly valuable for anyone who's looking to eventually run their own show, is to learn from people like that, just the business angle of how to run shows as well. And then the very last assistant job is the script coordinator position, which is what I did when I started on Blacklist day one. And I don't know if the Johns know this or not, so I don't know if I should say, but I had never done that job before when they hired me.
Well, just tell them you did.
Yeah, okay. When they hired me in season one, I had been a writer's assistant, and before that, I had been an assistant to a writer director. So I had no idea. I was calling my friends and I was saying, I love this show. I've seen the pilot. I want to be working with these people. I want to be on this. But what the heck is this job? And then they told me, script coordinator, I would say if you're looking to get an assistant, a type of assistant job on a show, prior to being a script coordinator, I would have said, go and be a writer's assistant. Because you would think, oh, you're in the room every day. You're with the writers. You're seeing them craft stories. You're making all these relationships. Obviously, no brainer. That's the one to do. But now realizing what a script coordinator actually does, what a script coordinator does is they are the person in the writer's office that is the liaison between the writer's office and production.
Oh.
So I was constantly on the phone, with production talking. They had questions about the script. If stuff was shooting, they had a quick question that needed to be answered. I was that person. And also the script coordinator is in charge of compiling the scripts. That they're the person that, as the writers, sometimes scripts get broken up. And one writer is writing, acts 1 through 3, and another one is writing acts 4 through 6. And then they get sent in their raw form to a script coordinator. And then that person has to make sure that the continuity all matches up, that scene numbers are put on it so that production knows how to shoot the script, that the continuity of the show makes sense, from episode 1 to episode 5 of the next season, that we're not saying anything that we've said before, that we're not contradicting anything that we've said before. And it ends up being, it's a wonderful way to see how things change from draft to draft, because script coordinators get to see both the initial scripts that the writers turn in and then any revisions that are made on those. So for me doing that job for 2 years, I think in that span of 2 years, it made me a much better writer than the 5 years prior, because I got to see through dozens of scripts, how things were changed, why things were changed, how scenes started, and then how they ended, and how they worked so much better once small things were changed. So I'd recommend, if anyone here is watching, they're like, oh, where should I start if I want to be on a television show? If you have the opportunity to be a script coordinator, especially working with incredibly talented people that are on a show like The Blacklist, go and do it.
Just top to bottom, it's a great show. Everything I've seen and read and heard, it seems like the crew and the cast all gel and everybody seems happy. It's not like some TV where you get a lot of drama, behind the scenes drama. So that's good.
Yeah, no, I've heard horror stories, but I've been so incredibly lucky with having great experiences so far. I hope it's like this for the rest of my career. And I'm just nothing but smiles all the time. I'm like, no, Hollywood's great. I don't know what all the stories are about, but I'm having a good time.
Well, worst case scenario, you're associated with Blacklist, Fringe, and Star Wars now. So you're good. So how does the comic book come into this? So you're a script coordinator and you're working on the show and you've worked on numerous episodes. How does the comic book come up?
Well, when I was on Fringe as a writer's assistant, I was in charge of their tie-in comic that was that was called Beyond the Fringe, and we did it with DC Comics, the 3rd season, and that was a fun series because we had Joshua Jackson, who played Peter, come in and actually write a few issues of the comic. But I ran that series there and also wrote a couple issues. So when I came on to Blacklist in season 1, I had that experience from Fringe of doing a few issues. And so I pitched Bogenkamp and Eisendrath, I think early on in season 1, hey, we have so many stories to tell about Red and Liz. That there are so many blacklisters that we're talking about, so many roads we can go down, and we only have 22 episodes a season. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be great to, do some of these as comic books, give a little bit extra to fans? The Fringe fans really seemed to like it. And admittedly, there was a little bit of trepidation at first because I think a lot of these tie-in comics tend to be with genre shows. Like, the Buffy comics I know are very popular. So for something that's considered to be a network procedural, even though I don't really consider us, just a procedural show, mm-hmm. I think it took a little bit of convincing to be like, no, I promise you there is a fan base out there that would like this additional content. And also we can just do great things with comics that we can't do on the show. So there was no traction in season 1. Then finally in season 2, I think they were just like, God, Nicole, stop asking us about this.
That's funny.
And so then finally, I ended up talking with people at Sony and talking with Titan Publishing mm-hmm. in England, and they were interested in doing a series. So we made it all happen last season. To my delight.
Did Titan come into the mix because NBC also was going to do Heroes with the comic there? Or did you guys have the relationship with Titan before Heroes kind of came on board?
I'm actually not sure. They didn't fill me in on that. I think somehow word just got back to them that people on the show were interested in doing comics, and then Titan just kind of swooped in.
Yeah, they're a great comic outfit out there too.
They're wonderful. Yeah, I've had great experience. My editor, David Leach, is absolutely fantastic. I send him scripts, and he sends back the most wonderful feedback and just little notes that make every issue so much better. So thank you, David.
How do you merge it all? I mean, because you've got stories that aren't directly related to the series, but you also, I'm sure, have to clear it, so to speak, because you don't want to disrupt the mythology, because this counts as part of the mythology, right? I mean, it
does.
Yeah, it's not like it's not just cast aside. It's just side stories that don't matter. This stuff is all connected, just like Marvel's world. So how do you get that A, figured out, and B, approved, I guess? I mean, how do you go about that? What's the process?
Well, I mean, I think I'm lucky in the respect that since I've been with the show since the first episode, and especially since part of my job as a script coordinator was keeping all the mythology intact and making sense. It's a little easier for me to come up with stories that sort of skirt the mythology and don't contradict any of it, just because I'm fairly familiar with the world after being here for 3 years. We are, I mean, potentially, I'm contracted to do the first 10 issues, and if people still keep reading them, we'd love to do more, and we may potentially, be bringing in some other writers from the comic industry if that's something that we can make happen. Mm-hmm. But I know at least for the first 10, it's been surprisingly easy, just because, I'm here and I'm in the room every day. So
it makes sense. So you're writing all of them then?
Yeah, I'm doing the first 10.
Wow, that's a heavy haul.
Yeah, I'm going to sleep right after this, right after we finish recording.
and you're also, I mean, you're writing an episode of the show, which we'll talk about later, but that seems like quite a bit for one writer to handle. I mean, that's you got to cross a lot of T's and dot a lot of I's there, I would think.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I do, but also, I mean, it's a little easy just because I love doing it. I mean, I've John Bokenkamp especially really supported me in doing these comics, and he was like, "No, Nicole, you're going to be great. You know, go off and write these." So it's been wonderful to have the opportunity to tell these stories and to write in the voices of these characters, that it makes it a little easier. Like, you can't really, you know, when I'm writing in my apartment and it's raining outside and I've, you know, got a script up, yes, you can be tired, but at the same time, like, you're writing stuff that people are actually interested in reading. Like, people like these characters, and I get to make scenes where they're interacting and talk about the themes that I'm interested in, and it's the thing I've always wanted to do. So the fact that I get to do it and people read it, it's I'm still in shock that is my life. So
that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. It's something you suggested, so it isn't like, here, Nicole, we want you to run this comic series and nobody else wants to do it, so it's yours. I mean, you really went out, you suggested it was your idea. You've done it previously, and I think that's great. I mean, it's really your baby. I mean, I realize it's John's show, but it's your baby.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm happy that people have responded so well to it, from what I can tell.
So the big question then becomes, you start to write it, you get John's buy-in, and then you immediately go and touch the mysterious 4 years that are off limits.
I know.
Yeah, how did you go about getting a 1992 year kind of plastered in there at the end of issue 3?
Oh, man, I know. I should have planned better, huh? I just dove right into that. Well, no, I can't tell. I can clear that up, I guess, on this podcast. I think, yeah, at the end of issue 3, there was a misprint with the date of 1992. It was actually supposed to be 1994.
Because that was my follow-up question, because then issue 4 starts, and it's 1994 again, and I was like, well, did John tell her to change it, or...
Oh, man. No, see, my editor was like, no, people won't notice. It's fine. We'll just keep. But you guys noticed.
Oh, yeah, we were like, we're finally going to get stories in that 4-year missing time frame. This is exactly what we want from the comic.
I just figured it was like Alias, just picked up a couple years later and stuff started happening.
Yeah, well, no, I can tell you it was all supposed to happen in 1994, those flashbacks between Red and Sebastian Royce. But I can say that, I mean, it takes place in 1994 right before Red resurfaces, because part of the story between Sebastian Royce and Red is what kind of criminal Red is going to be, because Sebastian is telling him to go with the stick, you know, to be rough with people, and that's how people will respond to you. Whereas Red, as we know from how, you know, he became the concierge of crime and how he deals with people now, prefers to, you know, to talk, to offer the carrot before putting down his very formidable fist. And so I thought that was an interesting story to tell, you know, how he made that choice. Because at some point, you know, that choice was made of how he was going to, what kind of criminal he was.
And I suppose we should throw out there, before we get too far into this, that if you haven't read the comic book series 1, issues 1 through 5, that this is going to be spoilery in nature. So we definitely want you to hear Nicole, but if you do want to read the comic books, you may want to turn it off for a little while and then come on back. Because the one thing that I've really, really loved about the comic as we're reading through it, and you're seeing this dynamic between Sebastian and Red, is this, you know, towards the end, they jump off this train and the hat goes flying away, and you actually get to see the birth of the fedora. That was awesome. That was like the best add-in you could have given a Blacklist fan. I was like, that's so cool.
Oh, that's so awesome. I wasn't, you're never positive if that stuff is going to come across. So I'm so glad that you guys enjoyed that.
Well, Troy's OCD about stuff. He catches every little thing where I'm like, hey, it's a hat. You know, and Troy's like, well, this is the beginning of the fedora, and this is the birth of it, and this is the origin story of the fedora. I'm like, I don't know if fedoras get origin stories, Troy, but all right.
And then it's so Indiana Jones. He gets thrown off the ship, and he washes up on shore, and the hat washes up with him.
I got a question in terms of why the decision to start the comic after the events of the Decemberist in season 2 when season 3 was kicking off this year?
Oh, well, I think I mean, I was writing issue 1 of the comic while we were still finishing up season 2, because issue 1 came out in July, and so at that point we were still figuring out what season 3 was going to be, honestly, at that point. So the first 5 issues take place at the end of season 2, and then the next 5, which is issues 6 through 10, and if you are caught up with the comics, issue 6 will come out January 20th. For all you comic book fans who are rushing to the stores.
Which they are right now. They just turned this off. They just ran to the store.
Good. Those do take place during the first half of season 3. So those are caught up with where we are on the show right now.
Because that's the interesting question, because when we were hearing about the comic book, there was kind of like this rumor that potentially in season 3 we would see some of the blacklisters from the comic book, and they might have like a asterisk or something when the title credits come across the screen to let people know, hey, this is a comic book. Is that still the plan, to have these blacklisters surface on the TV show?
I mean, that would be awesome, wouldn't it? That would be great. I'm not sure. I don't think that was ever a definite plan in writing the comics, that the characters were written in order for them to show up on the show. It would definitely be cool. I mean, just to tie the two worlds together. But that's ultimately up, I mean, to the showrunners, to John Eisendrath and John Bokenkamp, as to whether they want to bring any of that stuff in. And also the stuff that happens on the show. If, for example, anything happened on the show that did contradict something in the comics, the show is the show. So that is always going to be the ultimate canon. I mean, hopefully nothing will contradict, but the show is king.
What's the process from once you write it and you get it over to, is it Benny and Esther? Is that right?
Yes, Benny Lobel.
We assume you write the story and Benny and Esther kind of bring the pages to life. So how does that process work for a lot of people that aren't familiar with comic books? I mean, can you explain a little bit how that works?
Oh, yeah. So Benny Lobel is our artist for the first 10, and he is amazing. He lives in Madrid. He does not speak very much English, from what I've been told. I speak even less Spanish. But we have a wonderful team of translators who send my script over to Benny, and then Benny, does the art and then sends it back to me. There is a process that I'm still learning, honestly, because I have written comics before, but I haven't written that many. I mean, I'm not a Brian K. Vaughan. I'm not a Marjorie Liu. I'm not big in the industry, so I'm still finding my footing in comics, honestly. But what I will do is we have 22-page issues for the comic for each issue, and by the time the script is done, it ends up being between 30 and 40 pages for a 22-page issue, just with all the detail in terms of what happens in the panels, the dialogue between the characters. Because the way that I tend to write them, there are different ways to write comics. There's no set in stone way. Like, for example, with television, you write them through a program normally called Final Draft, and there's a certain way to format everything. The margins have to be very specific, or agents will throw them out. But with comics, there's really not. There are some people who write pages and they just say, okay, here's a chase sequence, and here's 2 lines that the characters say, and that will be it. But the way I tend to write the scripts is I say, panel 1, in the foreground we see this, in the background we see this. I describe the scene, I describe expressions on characters' faces, and then the dialogue underneath them. So my scripts end up being kind of long, between 30 and 40. So then I send them off to Benny through our translators, and he will send back just a layout for a page. And it's a wonderful feeling when I get those back for the first time, because I've been picturing these panels in my head. And again, it's a little different from writing for television, because you don't have the actors there. You're not working with directors or anybody in production. It's just you're describing shots. It's a little bit like doing storyboards if you do short films or things like that. So I have it in my head a certain way, and sometimes I'll get these layouts back from Benny that are, the 5 or 6 panels on a page, and he'll do something that it was not in the script. He'll make a connection between the panels that wasn't there, or he'll do something in the layout that I didn't intend, and I'll be like, man, you're a genius. This works so well. This brings something out of the scene that like I did not intend, but is so obviously cool. Like, thank you so much for working with me. It's great. And so they'll send back these layouts, and at this point they're just sketches. I mean, it's Red looks like Mr. Potato Head with 2 little bulbous eyes, and Liz is just hair. And then I'll give little notes, as to how the panels are arranged, or if certain things in each shot should be more focused on than others. Send them back. Go on with life for a short amount of time.
With life.
and then I'll get back these pencils. And that's the point when it really comes to life. That's when Benny takes his layouts and he inks them. And that's when you get, the wonderful shadows. You get details on the faces. You get the expressions. And one of the things that I've been so impressed with is Benny's skill at really, capturing the essence of Red, Liz, Aram, Wrestler, Cooper, everyone in the comic. Like, I think they're wonderful likenesses. And I think that he's captured little micro expressions. I mean, for example, that James Spader does when he's performing, I see those in the comic. In the panels, when he's chosen to showcase certain expressions, it looks like James.
Yeah, I've seen little ticks, little nuances that definitely were from James Spader's performance, which I think is pretty cool. And it's hard to do, and it's a lot more involved than I thought it would be. I'm just picturing like stick figures with word bubbles, and it sounds like it's a lot more detailed than I had planned. Like, I just pictured you like sitting around just drawing little stick figures and putting the words and trying to make it work in a panel and then sending it off, and then someone jazzes it up some. But it sounds like it's a lot more involved.
Oh man, I couldn't do it that way because I'm so bad at drawing. Like, I can't even draw stick figures. It's just horrible. Like, the perspective.
How do you mess up a stick figure? You just it's a stick.
Oh, I can do it. It turns into just this like horrible Cronenberg nightmare on the page where it's
okay, I would buy that comic. Seriously, if you did like a Cronenberg version of Blacklist, I would buy that. I would.
Oh man, it's bad.
I have to say, I think one of my favorite panels is when you had Red come up for the first time in issue 1, and he's sitting there over Alan Fitch's grave. I mean, it's like you look at that, and it's like, how did Benny actually make Spader look like Spader in this comic book? Because it's just, I'm actually looking at it right now in my Comixology app, and it's just like, gosh, he's like so good.
Oh, thank you. He did, especially on that page, he did a wonderful job. And that scene originated, I think, because I was trying to figure out how to start the comics, and I think when I was writing, I was just very sad that Alan Alda was no longer on our show, because we did go back and forth as to whether or not to keep him, and him not being on the show now was just it definitely had to be done for the story, but it was also just such a loss because he's such an amazing actor.
Mm-hmm. And then the fact that Benny actually has Alan Alda in that wreath shot in the one frame, I thought was brilliant. It was so good.
I had to get him in because I miss him so much. And, I figured that Red probably felt the same.
Oh, definitely. I mean, well, you couldn't draw him now because he's got an explodey head, but...
Yeah, except for the chair. The chair in the orange box survived the explosion. So I could just draw the chair in a nice crimson shade.
Yeah, I saw the most recent episode. They cleaned it up a little bit, which is good. I was afraid there might still be chunks around, but that's good.
Oh yeah, the smell in the orange box. I can guarantee you that it does not smell like oranges.
You just go in there and there's air fresheners now. There's car air fresheners just hanging everywhere.
Like in 7? Yeah.
Yep, that's what I was thinking. Oh.
I guess a big question I had was, I'm reading through, and we know that the first series is about the gambler, Sebastian Royce. Mm-hmm. And as we're starting to pen through the pages, we finally get to this spot where Liz and Red are walking, I believe it was in front of, looks like maybe the Jefferson Memorial or something. and you actually give Leon Kliklinski a blacklist number 148.
Mm-hmm.
But we never get a blacklist number for Sebastian, who the first series is about, nor do we get a blacklist number for John X, who becomes this assassin later on in issues 3, 4, and 5. So is that intentional that you gave only Leon a blacklist number?
Oh, you noticed that, huh?
I did.
Yeah, well, I think it's two-part. Right now it is intentional that there is only one blacklist number for basically 3 blacklisters, because you're right, there were 3 blacklisters in the first 5 issues. And I think part of that was both us, finding our footing with the series, and then also realizing that there are a limited amount of numbers. So maybe we should not give up all 3 of those, or 3 numbers to 3 blacklisters. So at the moment, that number covers all 3 of them in the first 5 issues.
Interesting.
Hmm.
That's been one of the biggest questions a lot of people have asked over the years, because we had, the first set of numbers was to find Lucy Brooks, and then the second set of numbers was to find Berlin, and the third set of numbers was, trying to find the fulcrum, and then it's very interesting how there's this pattern. And this season, specifically for season 3, we've always been asking, what do these numbers signify, other than maybe the kind of release of Liz and the exoneration of Liz from that story perspective? Because there's been people this season, we talked about it with John, that literally Red didn't even know about, like Ariok Kane. So it's interesting when you say that there could be 3 people that make up one number.
Well, I mean, I can tell you with the numbers, they do mean something. That there definitely are patterns, and it is important where blacklisters fall in the numbers. I mean, somebody with a number of 9 is going to be a very different blacklister than someone with a number of 333.
Yeah, which is funny, because Ansel Garrick then would technically have a higher number than the director. The director seems like he'd be pissing off Red a lot more than 24.
Well, that's your opinion, Troy. That's not a fact.
I know.
Stop trying to come up with facts.
It's an opinion. Tom was number 7. So Jacob, whatever the heck his name is this week, I always forget.
We just call him Ryan.
You wrote these characters, so they're all your babies or your children. But which of the 3 blacklisters do you think is the most interesting, that you would like to have seen more of, since technically all 3 of them are now DEAD?
Oh man, I know. Well, I mean, I think that probably the obvious answer to that is the gambler, because Sebastian Royce, because he's the one that has the history with Red, and people who have history with Red are few and far between. So I feel like if we had seen a few more scenes with him, we may know a little bit more about Red.
And that comes across in the comic book, I just have to say, because when you get towards that 4th and 5th issue, you're starting to, because there's always been this, and I won't go into I'm sure they've shared with you, between Daniel and John and some other people, about my Red being Liz's mom theory.
I was warned that we were going to talk about that.
No, we don't. We really don't have to.
Yeah, we don't have to. But
I think that's so awesome. You guys are great.
Don't antagonize or encourage him, whatever the word is. I don't want to. I just want him to shut up. Is really what I want. So if you could, anybody that can stomp that theory into the ground, I will thank forever.
Oh no! All theories are still up in the air. I want to hear more of those.
Oh, you don't. It's so stupid.
Well, the biggest thing about it, though, is that a lot of people have this Red as an imposter concept. That he isn't really Raymond Red Reddington that went to the Naval Academy and was groomed to be admiral. And it's almost like you see this because in the Gambler specifically, you see a lot of Red's ticks in Sebastian, and then when you have the kind of passing of the hat, you kind of go, oh, well, is Red kind of like an amalgamation of all the people that he's interacted with over the years? So the one thing that comes to mind is when Sebastian in the comic book is talking about, hey, the FBI didn't take care of my family. And then you're like, well, crap, is that Red's story or is that Sebastian's story that he's retelling? And so now you're just even more frustrated because you don't know which one's true.
Well, I tell you what, here's what fascinates me about Red, and specifically what fascinates me about people's response to Red, including my own response, honestly, which is how beloved that character is. And I think he's beloved for a number of reasons. I mean, because he has integrity with the people that he obviously cares about. He does seem to have a moral code that he stands by. But at the same time, he is a criminal. He has, even if he does not directly harm people, except, for people that in the show we, edge toward deserving it. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely true that actions that he has taken as the concierge of crime have indirectly hurt people. And so it's really fascinating to me that people see him as such a hero. I mean, including me. And I think a lot of it is because of the relationship with Liz, because of the tenderness that he has toward her. But I think what's interesting is that as viewers, when you, for example, would picture an interaction with Red, you picture yourself as Liz because she is the point of view character of the show. Mm-hmm. When in reality, if we were to encounter someone like Red Reddington in the wild, we may end up being one of those people that is indirectly hurt by his actions. So that whole thing is a toss-up to me, whether Red is good or bad, and how we feel about him is it's fascinating to me.
I think I'd definitely be collateral damage because I'd say something stupid and he'd just order me dead. So this is the way that it would go. Let's talk about the tape, aka the video. We're introduced to it in issue 1, and then we revisit it in issue 5. Did Red ever remake the tape, or did Kaplan destroy the original that Red wanted to get rid of anyway?
Mr. Kaplan destroyed the tape.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The tape does no longer exist.
As you were just saying, as you look at it from the point of view from the character, as we're looking at it through Liz's eyes, Red has that great line, like, certain things are meant to be said face to face anyway. And I think that really says a testament to like who Red is as a person, that he doesn't want to just leave, a Skype message for, his kid later on or whatever. He actually wants to have that face-to-face conversation because personal connections mean something to Reddington.
Well, exactly. And he now has a relationship with Liz that I think some part of him, wasn't sure that he would ever have. And so I think that does change how he would eventually tell her the truth.
Which then leads to the big question. I mean,
you've said it like 8 times, which would then lead to the big question. When do these big questions stop?
In this specific story of the gambler, is we know that it's taking place, season 2 into season 3, kind of that bridge, and then you have Red kind of fake his own death, which of course as the readers we're all like, oh, we know he's alive, it's no big deal, right? But Liz goes through such torment, in that 3rd issue, and then you have it come completely around on the other end, where now she's kind of thinking like Red and thinking like Sebastian in a lot of ways, so that she does end up coming to his rescue when John X has got Red in the crosshairs, and she actually saves Red's life. Now, because you go back to the beginning of the comic book, and it's like, oh, Red, set this whole thing up so I could get out of the FBI and early, and I'm just doing his business, and yet here she is saving his life because she realizes she can't live without him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if it was necessarily that she couldn't live without him. I mean, I think that was one of the things that she was struggling with in the issue, was exactly who she was without him around. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, to me, Blacklist is very much a show about identity, because we have so many of these characters who don't really know who they are, who may, be imposters. Tom certainly has impersonated people before. And so I think that's something that she was struggling with, but I think that her fear was that she wouldn't be able to be an agent without him, that she wouldn't know who she was without him, and that by being able to essentially solve the case much on her own at the end and save Red's life, she proved that she is, to herself at least, that she is someone without him, that she does not necessarily rely on him for her self-worth.
Good. Strong woman. Be independent. Troy, did you have any other story specific?
not from issue 1, but I guess we want to talk a little bit because as this is airing, series 2 has started. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect in the next 5 issues of series 2.
I am so very excited for people to read issue 6 when it comes out on the 20th, because both of these blacklisters, the Gambler was a blacklister that I had thrown around in the room season 1 that, didn't end up making it to air for a number of reasons, but it was an idea that had been kind of kicked around. This second blacklister is a blacklister called the Arsonist. He is one that I was pitching last season, and he is very near and dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. Because, as you can tell from the name, the Arsonist, there is going to be a lot of fire in the next 5 issues of the comic book. The idea of the Arsonist came from the realizations that Liz has had about the Night of the Fire.
Oh.
Liz's relationship to fire. And it came from me thinking, she's had all of these traumatic experiences associated with fire. Wouldn't it be interesting if we had a blacklister who used fire as part of his MO, and if that then paralyzed Liz from being able to function fully because of her past experience with it? This Arsonist is a blacklister who is hired by people to destroy large-scale evidence and burn it until there is nothing, completely erase any trace of things.
Wow. And I assume anybody that gets in his way, they burn too?
Anyone and anything.
Ouch.
Mm-hmm.
That's a horrible way to go.
And depending on the type of evidence, it sounds interesting because you could actually say standard fire is one thing, but the Arsonist, I'm assuming, is going to take it up a notch. Fire's got to burn a little bit hotter in certain situations.
Oh, yeah. It's not standard fire. It's blacklist fire.
That's funny. Oh, that's funny. How's the numbers been for the comic? Good?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Good?
No, I think good. I mean, as long as they still want to make them, then that means that there are people buying them. So, until they tell me, hey, we don't want to do any more of these, then I'm feeling good about them. And I think we've had a couple of second printings on a few of the issues. So.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, if they continue with series 2, then I would assume that it's still doing pretty well then.
Well, and they're doing the graphic novel, which is nice too.
I like that idea. Just put it all into one. Because I feel like I get at the end and I'm like, oh, when's the next one coming? Let's go.
I know. And then when issue 5 was delayed, I was like, God, I can't wait.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I mean,
it's awesome
I think it's
to torture people.
I know. I'm sorry. No, I think it's good because, too, some of the people I think that are fans of the show that have started reading the comics, some people have messaged me and told me it's the first comic that they've ever bought. And so it may not be people that are familiar with, going into comic stores and getting a pull box and all of that. So I think having the graphic novel is something that they can just buy on Amazon will be, might help get it out there a little bit more.
I agree with that. I think you'll get more people curious that way.
Do you prefer the paper then? Or, because I bought them via Comixology just because I wanted to be able to read it on my phone when I wanted to.
Oh,
so
you're into the future.
I am in the future, yes.
I like paper.
I don't go down any rabbit holes. I like to stay in the present.
No, I prefer paper. Paper has a smell and a tactile feel, and I like being able to look at the panels from right up close to my face and then very far away. And I don't know. I will always probably buy print as long as they make print.
Were you always a comic lover, or is that just something that you fell into?
No, I was the first comic I ever read was Neil Gaiman's Sandman when I was probably 12 or 13, which may have been too young to read it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But it influenced so much of my personality and worldview, and then I just kept reading comics since then. I think I've yet to have the same experience reading a comic as I did with Sandman, because I'm not as into superhero stuff as I am into sort of alternate independent comics and worlds like that. But I will say that I started reading this comic called Monstrous that is in its second issue now. I think it's published by Image. That is freaking fantastic. And it's giving me those same sort of tingles as when I first read Sandman as a kid.
Monstrous?
Monstrous. Yeah, it's by Marjorie Liu, and it's set in a fantasy world, but it is about this. Actually, it's funny because thematically it's a little similar to Blacklist in that it is this girl with a connection to a quote unquote monster, quote unquote beast.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I recommend it if you guys are into comics.
I am probably more so than Troy. I grew up with him. I mean, I'm not nearly as avid as I used to be, but I'm like you. I lean more toward the darker end of it. I don't, the superhero stuff, Spider-Man, Wolverine, Batman, that's about the only three that I would really get into, but I really prefer like a solid story, a darker tone.
Yeah.
This looks cool.
Mm-hmm. The art's amazing.
Yeah, that looks cool. I'll definitely check that out. Thank you. So I guess my question is, once you're done with it, or you're involved in this series and you're transitioning to the actual episode that you're writing, which is episode 13, is that correct?
Yeah, my first episode of the show is episode 13 of this season, which I think at the moment is going to air February 4th.
Oh, so it's coming up quick.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up quick. Now, how does that work for you? Because you're already involved in the show. You have obviously a deep connection to the show. You've worked on it for a couple of years now. When you go from writing the comics, which you had basically complete control over, it sounds like, or a large number of control over, a large portion of control, to the episode where there's a lot more people involved in that story, do you feel like you have a certain ownership to a degree where you have to like let it go a little bit because you've kind of been in charge of where these characters went, and now you have to release a little bit and hear other people's ideas, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, it's two different hats. I've been incredibly lucky to have the opportunity to do the comics. I mean, everything that has been written has been filtered through John Bokenkamp and John Eisendrath. I mean, nothing has gone on the page that did not pass through their approval process.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it really is a completely different job from, writing comics, writing these supplemental materials that are blacklisters that did come, things that I've been pitching before, and then working on an episode of the show, because our show really is group written a lot of the time. Like we're in the writer's room. There are about, I think there are 10 writers, 11 writers on the show. I'll have to go count when I'm done with this. And I mean, we're down there every day bouncing ideas off of each other and discussing things together. So it's very much a group effort. But at the same time, all of us serve at the privilege of the president. We are hired to put John Bokenkamp and John Eisendrath's vision. It's their show, and we're doing our job well if we can take anything off of their plate, because they live and breathe this show more than any of us ever could. So when you're writing the show, as opposed to the comics, it's very much a collaborative process, and that's part of why you want to work in television anyway. I mean, I'd hate to be just in a room by myself all day with just my head to cycle through. I would go crazy very quickly. Like that's the benefit of working on a show, especially with people at this level. I mean, we have, Daniel Knopf, who created Carnival. We have Daniel Cerrone, who, ran Dexter and Constantine, and Dawn DeNoon, who was on Law & Order SVU for something like 16 years, and Dave Thomas. We have this amazing staff of people who've been in the business for so long. You want to be there collaborating and working with them. It's just an honor to be in the same room.
Wow. You could tell Mr. Dexter, I like that finale, and all the critics can shut up, because be sure to pass it out if he's involved with that at all. I'm just letting you know.
I'll tell him.
I like that a lot. Lumberjacks away. So when your episode comes out, is there anything you can tease about it without, obviously, you can't tell us any mythology stuff, because that's going to be, there's several episodes to go. Is there anything about the actual Blacklister you can discuss, or is that off book right now?
Oh gosh, I can tell you when I first started, when I started this podcast, I was like, okay, my one goal is to not say anything that will get me in trouble.
Well, then don't. I don't want. We don't want you to get in trouble.
Well, but I think I can tease a little bit because it's coming up so soon. I can tell you that my blacklister's name is Alistair Pitt. His number is 103, and Alistair Pitt is a master negotiator who gets on Red's radar because he's surfacing to unite two crime families.
Okay, I think that's a good tease, and that should keep you out of hot water.
And he also travels with two very cute Pomeranian dogs.
Well, now I'm more interested because now you got animals involved.
Yeah, and those were fun dailies to watch because I was just watching the dogs over and over. Like, you guys are so freaking adorable.
Now, when you write the episode, how involved are you once it actually goes to shoot? Are you on set at that point, or I know you guys are in LA and the set's in New York. So, I mean, are they constantly calling you for we need a line for this or we need to tweak this, that sort of thing? How's that work?
It happens sometimes, but I mean, because we are a third season show now, they are a well-oiled machine over there. I mean, we're here, producing the scripts every couple weeks, and they are on it. They are either prepping, the episode to go next, or shooting an episode now, or then we have the people here in post working on an episode that just shot. So they pretty much know how to do things on the day-to-day over there. They are masters at that.
Mm-hmm.
If there are questions, I mean, then yeah, they'll shoot it to us, but especially with the caliber of actors that are in that particular episode, I can tease this as well. I got very lucky with my first episode of Blacklist in that my Blacklister, Alistair Pitt, is going to be played by Tony Shalhoub.
No.
Yeah.
You got Monk? Monk is you? I mean, I knew he was coming on the show. I didn't know that was, oh my God, now I'm squeeing. I'm a huge Monk fan, and I love Galaxy Quest and just about everything he does. I love.
No, your reaction right now is how I reacted when I found out.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I'm like, I don't have to worry about anything that's happening over there because everything that's happening on set is gold with Tony Shalhoub.
If I told you how many times my son and I watched Monk, I mean, it's just pathetic. It really is. Just over and over and over. That's cool. Congratulations. That's very cool for you and for Tony, because now he has wonderful words to say.
Oh, thank you. I'm very excited.
I think his next Emmy is coming. That's what I think.
Absolutely.
That'd be awesome. Your lips to God's ears, man.
I have to ask, because when you said Alistair Pitt, and then I was like, oh my gosh, you worked on Fringe. Did you take that from Alistair Peck? Was that some of your inspiration for that character?
No, that's a great connection, but no, I just like the name Alistair.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You just overthink so much.
I just watched White Tulip the other night, so that's why it was fresh.
Just
I was
so
like, Alistair, I've heard that name before.
Overthink. I'm sure Alistair Pitt is probably Red's mom or something in your head.
Well, I tell you what, though, I mean, you never really know, because I think a lot of, people ask those questions sometimes, like, where do ideas come from? And a lot of it is just being a sponge and just going about your day-to-day, and maybe sometimes things hit you, and then they come out in your work a couple years later. I mean, you never really know.
So now you said you were with Bad Robot 3 years prior to doing the Fringe stuff. So did you get to work on Alias at all?
No, Alias was before my time.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did not meet John Eisendrath until I started on Blacklist.
Gotcha. Because there's just so much Alias throwbacks, obviously with the the Mother and the Cabal's kind of like the Alliance, and then we kind of joke about it on the podcast. So every time when Red calls Liz and it's Nick's Pizza, we're like, oh, that's totally John Eisendrath throwing that in there for the Joey's Pizza fans.
Oh, wow. No, I'll admit I never finished Alias.
No.
I know, and and I felt horrible the whole time I worked at Bad Robot too. I'm like, man, I'm a bad employee. But no, I need to finish because
I'm a bad employee.
Because I've heard wonderful things. I think I'm in season 2.
Wow.
I really like that ending too. So you can tell John that. I'm a fan of that one. There's some people who are harsh on that one. I liked how everybody ended up. You want me to tell you, Nicole? I'll tell you how everybody ended up. Just
No, don't
spoil the whole thing
do
for
not
you.
spoil it. That's such a great ending.
Oh, I'm only like 10 years too late, but don't spoil me on Alias, please.
Sydney wakes up and it was all a dream. That's what I heard.
Man,
In a shower.
Yeah.
With
I
Bobby.
don't believe you.
I'm probably lying.
Such a good show. Seen it 3 times all the way through.
Oh my God! When do you go outside? My Lord! So what's next for you? I mean, you've got after the comic series. Are you doing something else? Are you prepping for another episode maybe next season? What are you doing?
Yeah, no, I hope so. I mean, the big thing that happened to me this year was I was promoted on the show from script coordinator to staff writer.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm an official writer on the show, which, I mean, gosh, it happened 6 or 7 months ago, and I think I'm still sort of in shock and awe over it. Just because it's one of those things that you dream about doing. You dream about writing for television, and then when it finally happens, you're like, oh my God, am I going to wake up any second? Is someone going to burst in and pinch me, and then I'll be back in Virginia.
Wow, that's
away from
drastic.
Yeah. Hopefully, I'll be back for another season, and I'd love to write more episodes and continue doing the comics because I've had a real blast doing them, and I hope that a little bit of my joy comes through the page because I'm just on my keyboard just grinning like a maniac the whole time.
Well, I could definitely say that I'd love to see more of the comic. If nothing else, that we get some of the blacklisters that don't make it past standards and practices. Because let me tell you, if we can get the issue with Daniel Knopf's Colonel Bob and the entire backstory on Tom, I would totally buy that series.
Oh man, that's right. He told you the story about the rabbits, didn't he?
He did.
Oh yes, yeah. Wow.
That was a special scene to read. That one.
You sound like you're still bothered by it, like a little troubled. A little.
No, I'm bothered in the best way.
I just can't see what Benny's going to do with it when he gets the cells to draw.
Yeah, you can do pretty much anything in comics, so give it a go.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be. Have you seen Watership Down? It's gonna be a lot like that.
Oh my God.
That's funny. Well, is anything else, Troy?
No, I think I'm good. I mean, I'm just so excited that we got extra content, which I think is something that when you get to that point, the show has been really successful, and the fact that you guys are appreciative of the fans to give them the extra content, and that you take the time out, obviously, to come on tonight, Nicole, with us. I mean, just shows how much the entire cast and crew has been fan focused from the start, which just really makes a great television program to watch.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, thank you guys so much for doing these and for reading the comics. And it's always nice to do something and then have an audience, which is something that, I mean, I'm still in awe of. So thank you guys for having me and for reading. And as long as you're still out there and you want the content, we would love to keep making it.
Well, and I'm really hoping, because I know a lot of people that are fans of the show that didn't even know there was a comic, and which is common. I mean, you got people that don't read comics, so how would they know that unless they caught the advertisement or something? But so it's nice that, hopefully with our audience, maybe they can tell their friends that are also Blacklist fans. Maybe the word will get out so that people will actually check it out, because it is very Blacklist centric. So if you're a fan of the show and you're into the mythology, I think it's a great accompaniment to the show.
Oh, thank you so much.
Companion, so to speak.
Well, I can tell you this too. If you are behind on the comics and you want to catch up, we are releasing a graphic novel on April 5th, and that will compile the first 5 issues into one handy package.
Ooh.
So yeah,
nice.
So if you missed them the first time around, you have a second chance.
And that means in like 5 years, a movie will be based on the graphic novel, because that's the trend. And J.J. Abrams will probably end up directing it, because it will all come around. It all comes back around.
I like the way you think.
Let me know how your work on Star Wars Episode 8 goes, because that's pretty cool. So, well, best of luck, and I know we've taken way more of your time than we planned, which is what we do. We like to talk.
Yeah.
But we definitely appreciate everything you're doing with the series and look forward to series 2. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm jazzed.
I hope you guys like it, and thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
All right. Well, that was our interview with Nicole Phillips. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Did you enjoy it? I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it was a really great time to just sit back, understand the fact that this was actually her baby and that she really wanted to make sure that this happened, and she was pitching it for so long. I think it really gives some insight as to how much care, again, that these writers have for characters and the care and feeding that they give them, that they want to be able to showcase these stories that they've kind of breathed life into that never actually made it to television. So I think this is great that she's doing the first 10 issues, and hopefully there'll be a lot more after that.
I think it's great that this is the first podcast she'd ever done. So she lost her podcast virginity here. You're welcome.
We're famous, I guess.
I don't know about famous, but
infamous maybe.
Yeah, that's a little bit more accurate. And I really appreciated you coming by and talking to us, Nicole. That was really cool and especially very interesting. And now we know that she is directly related to Star Wars, whether she wants to admit it or not. That's just the way it is. So I just like to connect people to things that they really aren't connected to at all. If you want to read the comic, which you should, if you haven't already, you should. There's a link in the show notes, but also if you go to the official Blacklist site on NBC, there's a link right there. It says get the comic, so you can jump right over. But there's also a link in the show notes. Graphic novels coming out soon, all that good stuff. Definitely pick it up if you have not read it. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there, and I think you might get some more mythology, and you might get a few more tidbits on the characters themselves if you pick it up.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this new 5 issues that are coming with the arsonist. I think that's going to be really exciting to see how the fire plays into everything that Liz deals with, going back to her childhood as a 4-year-old.
That's a hot issue. That's what that is. As I mentioned earlier, make sure to go to the NBC site. Go to NBC.com/theblacklist. That's NBC.com/the-blacklist. That's where you can get the comic, pick it up right there. Go to Titan Comics, or there's a link in the show notes. That's going to conclude this episode. Be sure to follow us on Twitter this season at The Blacklist GSM, where we live tweet during the East Coast feed. We use the show's hashtag, The Blacklist. We also have a Facebook group to search for The Blacklist Exposed and join us for the fun.
Intel from you is what we want, and we have a few ways you can submit intel into the agency. You can interact with us on Tumblr, Instagram, or visit theblacklistexposed.com for all the show notes and details, or leave us a message using your smartphone. Just use our send voicemail button right from your screen.
You can also subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, leave us a review, or listen from the website if you are really on the go. Make sure you download our app for iOS and Android powered by Spreaker. It's a cool app. It works and stuff. You will also find all the intel and analysis about this interview with Nicole Phillips by visiting theblacklistexposed.com. Hopefully Nicole comes back on. I really enjoyed talking to her. She was great.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what she's got planned once the 10 issues that she's contracted for are up, if she's going to continue or who she's going to pass it off to. Maybe some of the other writers. The Brandons could write an issue. Maybe Daniel Knopf could write an issue.
Maybe you shouldn't be allowed to talk about comics. Obviously, you're not cool and smart enough.
I know, because I buy them digitally, so apparently I'm not
exactly.
the cool one.
Old-timer or futuristic. I don't know which one you are, but paper is the way to go, kids. That's the way to go. Get off my lawn. All right. Big thanks for listening.
We'll see you again soon. Take care. Until next time, I'm Agent Troy Heinritz. That's at Troy Heinritz on Twitter. And if you want to learn more about me, just visit, about.me/Troy Heinritz.
And I'm Agent Aaron Peterson. You can hear me talking about movies and TV on the Hollywood Outsider podcast, as well as Remake This Movie Right. We are available at thehollywoodoutsider.com or on Twitter at H_outsider. Be sure to subscribe, download the app, submit your feedback, but most importantly, keep yourself off of the Blacklist.
The Blacklist Exposed is a Golden Spiral Media production. Find more of our great podcasts at goldenspiralmedia.com/podcasts.